You're listening to Conflict Radio on the Conflict Radio Network. Greetings, and welcome to Conflict Radio. Today is December 14th, 2020, and I've got Jared Murphy joining us, as we are also going to be joined by Budcat7. He's been referred to us by some listeners of ours that they were sending me emails wanting me to get him on the show, so we've got him on the show. If you have somebody you want to get on the show, just send me an email and I will try to get them on the show, as long as they're interesting. Jared, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm pretty good, man. I've got what's funny? What are you laughing about? You thinking about something?
Well, I just like your disclaimer to everyone. I'll try to get them on the show if they're interesting.
Well, yeah, they have to be interesting. It can't just be like, somebody.
You got to talk to my dad. He's really cool.
Yeah. No, I don't want to talk to your dad. So, Jared, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you, and then we'll get going on the interview.
Yeah, cool. So I have notaliens.com for my book. It's Not Aliens, Worse It's Us, Discovering a Lost History, and also for a new member area right now for Christmas. You can grab 2 copies or 1 copy of the book signed for free for signing up for a 6-month or 1-year membership. That'll have all sorts of exclusive member content and photos and cool research. It's totally worth the $2.65 it works out to monthly, but that's at notaliens.com. You can find me on Amazon for the book, just with you don't want a signed copy, no big deal. I sign them and send them out personally for a few dollars less. You can go to Amazon and grab the book. And then, of course, we're always doing stuff here at Conflict, so you can always find us in the at least the both of us in our conflict category of Jared and Conflict.
Yeah, we have a special playlist for shows that Jared and I do together. Just go to the Conflict Radio channel on YouTube. There's a couple of them, and just look for the playlist where it's Jared Murphy or Jared Murphy. I guess I don't know how I did it. Jared Murphy playlist or shows with Jared Murphy or something like that. That you can listen to the Jared Murphy shows that we do together. Anyway, we'll be right back on Conflict Radio with Budcat7 from Stonewall Research right after this. And welcome back to Conflict Radio. We've got Budcat7 with us from Stonewall Research. You can find his YouTube channel on YouTube. And we also have Jared Murphy joining us tonight. Budcat, how you doing?
Very well. How you doing, Mike? How you doing, Jared?
Doing great.
Cool.
So we had quite a few listener requests to get you on with Jared Murphy to talk about the stone walls in New England. Could you talk to us about that for a little bit?
Well, yeah. First of all, I mean, of course, we all know it. We're familiar with the stone walls of New England, quote unquote. But as we had a conversation before we got on air here, the stone walls also extend into northern New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Canada, and other states as well, including California, where there are these mysterious stone walls. I'm also I also research that area as well. But there's stone walls all over North America, not only the northeastern part.
So what can you tell us about them? I grew up in northern New Jersey, and I had a forest out back, I guess like pretty much in my backyard that I would go play in as a kid. And the middle of the forest back there'd be stone walls literally running all through it. And my parents always told me that they were built by the old colonialist settlers. What's your take on
Colonists
that?
and settlers, yeah. That's basically the mainstream take on it. However, there doesn't appear to be any supporting evidence of that. Only a few mentions of stone wall building in the diaries of these settlers and colonists. Considering the scope of the work, let me just tell the audience, first of all, if not familiar with the stone walls of New England, a survey was done in 1872 by the Department of agriculture. It was a land survey done up here in the Northeast, and then that data was collated in 1936 by, I think it was in the late 30s, by an academic. And they found, I mean, this is their estimate, that there are something like 240,000 miles of stone walls in the northeastern part of the United States. Again, this does not include other states such as New Jersey, Pennsylvania, or Canada, where these stone walls also exist in a similar fashion, a similar style. So this is where the main research on my channel, I got into it through listening to Jim Vieira, who many people might be familiar with, the whole giant issue, which I also cover on my channel, and it's related to the stone walls because Jim Vieira believes that the stone walls in New England were built by large hominids, or what we call the giants, and so do I. I came to that determination on my own. But that's what, we share that same view of the stone walls. So we believe that 90% of them were built by these people, these unknown people, who were probably rather large, and that only some 10% of the stone walls were actually built by colonists and settlers, because if you see the patterns of the walls from a lidar view, let's say, okay, they don't make any sense in any sort of colonial or settler sense. They're just so convoluted, and many of them are along Indian trails, which is also something that I cover on research that I cover on my channel as well. But not only do you have the stone walls in these areas, these remote areas of the Northeast, in the heavily forested areas up on mountains, etc., where it's not conducive to farming, not a lot of arable land in these areas, but there are many stone walls in these remote areas where you would think nobody has lived, and the people in these areas say nobody has lived for hundreds and hundreds of years. So. And by the way, the native peoples do not claim to have built any of these stone walls either. Their lore and mythology tells them that they were built by some other people that were there before them. So, my take on this is similar to Jim Vieira and other researchers, that, the majority of the stone walls built in the Northeast is 240,000 miles. And by the way, 240,000 miles, that's halfway from Earth to the moon. So I know Michael Tellinger goes around saying that, the largest area of ancient stone, man-made stone constructions is in South Africa, but I've challenged him on this, and I've challenged him on Coast to Coast, and, it's my contention and Jim Vieira's contention that the largest area of man-made ancient stone constructions is northeastern North America. And 240,000, according to Barbara DeLong, who's another researcher into the stone walls, as she made a popular film called Secrets of the Stones. And I got into it through her film and Jim Vieira. And she believes that there's probably double that. If you include Canada and some of these other states, got the part in the background noise, there's a train going by, sorry guys. But there's something more like 500,000 miles of stone walls in the northeastern part of North America. So that's more than all of the rail lines in the United States. So if you would take all of the railroad, all the tracks in the United States, it's pales in comparison to the amount of walls there are in the northeastern part of North America. And that doesn't include stone chambers, effigies, cairns, dolmen. I've done a lot of research up in rural upstate Connecticut, in the Green Mountains, and in Vermont. And in my research, I found that there were serpent effigies built into these walls all over the place. As a matter of fact, one of my subscribers sent me pictures of identical constructions in the Catskills, very close to northern New Jersey there, where you were running around in the forest over there. So these serpent effigies appear in the stone walls just about everywhere that you go. You can see evidence of this. I have it, on my channel, and videos on my channel. I show this. And there's also a language in the stone walls. I believe this is part of my research and part of the revelations about the stone walls that nobody actually knew about, but other researchers, now that they've looked at it, concur with me. But there's a sort of language built into the stone walls. I'm going to cover that more in detail on my channel real soon. I've already covered it in a number of videos. You can see it on a playlist on my channel called The Stone Wall Code. And there's a language in the stone walls. What it says, I don't know, but I mean, this is part of my research. So basically, the stone walls of northeastern North America represent a time period, some period in the past, thousands of years ago. They were built by these rather large people who existed in those areas during that time. I've covered on my channel the accounts of the giants in every state of the United States. And also I'm going through them in international now. So you can hear the majority of the accounts of the giants that were unearthed in the past on my channel, state by state. And this includes Northeast and North America, but the
So I have a question. If they
Sure.
were built by giants, why are most of them only like 1.5 to 2 feet tall at the most? Really, I mean.
Well, that's another part of my research that we're going to get. That's right. So why are they only 2 feet tall? Well, they frequently say that they were used to house or pen domestic animals. But the tricky part to that is that they're only 2 or 3 foot tall. Most of them, not all of them. Okay. Most of them are only 2 to 3 foot tall, and some of the areas, the demarcated areas, have no openings in the walls. So there's no opening. There's be like a square next to another square, next to a rectangle, whatever it might be, including other shapes that aren't exactly, square, but there's no openings in the wall. So if they were made for domestic animals or any other use for that matter, why are there no openings? They are only 2 to 3 foot high, and there's no openings on them. Well, that's another part of my research that goes quite deep, and it's also related to the Adena and the Hopewell, okay, which you might know about from, archaeology and anthropology done in Ohio, Indiana, along the Mississippi, etc., and all these mound building cultures. So I've been saying for years that the Adena and the Hopewell were people who were contemporaries who were living together in the same society, and just recently the University of Indiana in their research also came up with that. So these are the sort of subjects that I cover on my channel. I mean, it goes way deep. So in any case, it just so happens that the Iroquois, who we know as the Iroquois, but that's not their name. Their name is the Haudenosaunee, this confederation of tribes in upstate New York, Canada, etc., who speak Iroquoian, are related to the Cherokee, and the Cherokee are also Iroquoian-speaking people, and they happen to occupy all the areas that the Hopewell and the Adena does. I just recently did a video about how I believe that the Iroquoian people and the Cherokee, for instance, are the Hopewell. That's who they are. We don't know much about the history after the demise of the Adena and the Hopewell. The area between that and where the native peoples appear is sort of a gray area. So, but it just so happens that the Iroquoian people occupy these areas, and the gray peacemaker who gave them their highly structured society, which is the most advanced in all of the Americas. The Iroquois may not have been more advanced technically than some of the other cultures in the Americas, but they were the most advanced socially. And that is because of their law, the law of peace, which some of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence is taken from the Iroquois Constitution, by the way, and many of the elements of it. And it's actually an article in Congress that was passed that recognizes this, okay, that the Adena peoples passed on their structure, their social structure, to the Iroquois people through the Hopewell. And that's who the Iroquois people are. You know, I give many proofs of this in the videos on my channel. And also, you know, other things you can hear about this quote-unquote giants on my channel that covers that, you know, they're not cannibals. This is, you know, I ambushed Ellie Marzulli on Coast to Coast about this. And, you know, we're used to hearing the sort of things about the giants, that they were cannibals because of the Bible, because of the stories of the Native American Indians, because of the stories in English, like Jack and the Beanstalk, Jack the Giant Killer, etc., etc. But I put forth on my channel, I contend that these are just demonization of the enemy for whatever reasons, okay? And I give more proofs against this, you know, against this notion that the giants were cannibals. This is just a reason to slaughter them, as you know, as we know from the story in the Bible with Joshua, maybe starting in that period. But there seems to be a giant genocide that's gone on all over this planet, and I covered that on my channel too, the giant genocide. But
all right.
The giant skulls that are dug up, let's say even in the northeastern area, all show perfect dentistry, okay, perfect teeth, okay. Many of the dentists who examined these skulls in the past, who dug them up, exclaimed by seeing the teeth that they must have been vegetarians, okay. The Lovelock Cave people, okay, who we know the story from the Paiutes, they were called cannibals, etc., etc., but that's not what their nickname was. Their nickname was Thule eaters, Thule eaters. That's an aquatic plant. For whatever reasons, they weren't called baby eaters or children eaters or man eaters. They were called Thule eaters, which is an aquatic plant. And it just so happens that all their teeth are perfect, which any dentist can tell you is that that person, whoever it was, did not consume red meat. Okay.
All right.
So,
All right. Let's get Jared in here. Jared, what do you
Yeah.
think? And do you have any questions so far? What's going through your
Yeah,
mind?
well, I like the idea of the rock walls everywhere. I'm so the researcher in me. The first question I have is, well, I'll give you two. One is, what are the characteristics? What's the similarity in the walls? Is it the type of rock, shape of the construction? Are they using mortar? Are they polygonal in any way? How deep are they? What's the tallest one you found? I mean, obviously, maybe some of them have been readapted for other use, for other people, for other cultures, but of the ones across the country, what are the similar or characteristics of them being built by the same culture? And then the other thing is, have you dug any of them up or looked around them?
yeah. Well, I've done a whole series of videos on a stone wall site that's in rural Connecticut, in upstate rural Connecticut, which is literally like a ceremonial Disneyland for wall constructions. You can see those videos on my channel. And also up in rural Vermont, in Springfield, Vermont, and up on the Mount, in the mountains there. Just to cover some of your questions, yeah, some of the walls are tall, some of them up to 12 foot tall, but that's a rare instance where that might occur. I show some up in Connecticut there that are 5-6 feet tall that line the banks of a brook up there, where there's just these massive, massive stones that weigh tons in the bottom of this construction. And to also cover some of that about the colonists and settlers. Some of the colonists and settlers redid some of these walls, or adapted some of these walls, or extended some of these walls. They certainly did that. Besides building their own walls, they adapted many of these walls, and you see evidence of this in sort of smaller stonework to even out maybe some damaged parts here and there. And this is evident everywhere in the Americas. You can see that in Central America with the Maya, and certainly down with the polygonal stone construction in Peru. I cover all these things too, but and also the Mayans and everything else. But as far as the stone walls of New England is concerned, yes, there are some which are taller, but in general, most of them are only 2 to 3 feet tall. And in many instances, they've been cannibalized. So even if you look at a lidar view, you may not see the complete picture, because many of them were cannibalized for road fill, other stone walls. And even today, they're not looked at as like a national treasure or anything, so they're not protected in any way. If you own property with stone walls, you can certainly, dismantle them and get rid of them if you want. But I believe that many of the stone walls are constructed in a way that's similar to polygonal stone construction, although polygonal stone construction sort of connotes a sort of cutting and shaping of stone. They're just working with raw stone here. Not that they didn't cut or shape any of these stones, but it's more like a patchwork, like a puzzle work. And what Jimmy and I found up there in Vermont was this type of, you would go along a stone wall which is made with this stone that's either in the local area there, or in some cases you don't even know where the stone came from. There's no area that has sort of limestone type boulders in it anywhere around there. They obviously came from.
I'm going to interrupt you for a second. I was always told that, during the Ice Age, the glacier was all over New York, all over northern New Jersey, all over Pennsylvania.
I guess that's if you believe in the Ice Age. Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't. And, this is another area of research that I get into on my channel. That is the phony Ice Age theory. It's a theory. Nobody says it right, because this is the way we learn it in school. You and I and Jared, I'm sure, all learned in school about the Ice Age, but that's an incomplete statement in itself. Okay, it's called the Ice Age theory, and it was made up by a man named Louis Agassiz, who was a Swiss American geologist at a time where geology was just in its nascency, in something like 1823, I believe, something like that. So it's 200-year-old theory. Okay, it's a theory, okay, and I don't know how many people out there believe that it's a fact, and it's not a fact, okay, it's a theory. Yes, there's stone all over. There can only be one reason for that in the minds of mainstream academics, and that would be some ice sheet moving across the land, et cetera, but
yeah, when it melted, it dropped all these stones, yeah.
People like Immanuel Velikovsky and William Corliss disagreed with that idea, and many people in Agassiz's time also disagreed with him. People who were scholarly people disagreed with him. Like this theory, Ice Age theory, like many theories, is a consensus theory. Okay, this is how science is done. I don't know if your listeners know that or you guys know that, but what happens is that there are, peer-reviewed papers of research. A symposium is gathered. Okay, people present their theories, whatever they are, maybe on the same subject matter. Okay, and then all the mainstream academics vote on their favorite theory. That's how science works. Okay, so, if it's a 49-50 vote on the Ice Age, well, that other 49% of people's voices are never heard. Okay, this is how science is done. It's called consensus science. Okay, every theory, every hypothesis that gets into your textbook is voted upon by academics who are asked to attend these symposiums, whether it be the British Royal Society, whatever it might be. Okay, then they all vote as to what their favorite theory is, and that's what's taught in school. Unfortunately, when you and I were taught about the Ice Age, they left that word off the end of that theory because they don't want you to believe it's a theory. They want you to believe it's a fact. Okay? And what I believe, and what William Corliss probably believed, and what the people from the Thunderbolts Project believe, is something more like what happened to the Earth that we think was an ice age, was that the Earth was knocked around a bit, like as all these planets, rearrange themselves in their orbits in the solar system, is what, what Velikovsky was going on and on about, and what David Talbot and Walt Thornhill goes over on the Thunderbolts Project.
All right,
Okay.
that's interesting. Let's get Jared. What do you think about this? You've heard about the Ice Age, I'm sure, in North America. Do you think that happened, or what do you think?
Well, I have to agree in this. As far as the snapshots we get of our ancient history, when we look at there's geological evidence that a geologist is going to say, okay, well, here's the theories that we work off of. Well, here's some hard facts of what we know about stone. But we have a bunch of issues with stone in general. We can't date it. We date it in layers. We date it by the bones we find in those layers. There's a number of, I would say, of all of these standard academic, in quotes, sciences that are all, they're in their infancies, and they're based in theoretical just papers and like symposiums, agreements, archaeological congresses. Like Michael Cremo got invited into a number of archaeological congresses after 10 years on forbidden archaeology. He had reminded a lot of paleoanthropologists, anthropologists, and archaeologists that there are things that don't add up, like Hueyatlaco, Mexico. You can't have sites that are 275,000 plus years old and maintain a narrative that people only came to North America 13,000 years ago. I'm sure I can't remember the name of the Canadian scientist that Michael brought up. We always bring up Virginia Steen McIntyre, but we never bring up that Canadian scientist that was more in your area towards from Canada to Long Island. I can't remember his name. Maybe you do. About he was crucified. His career was destroyed because he had located camping sites, active village sites that very much appear to be pre 30,000 years, and he got his career destroyed because he was easily pointing out that there are sites all over Canada and North America there around the East Coast that show signs of pre, in quotes, ice age. So as far as the idea that there was a giant sheet of ice and then at some point that explains the water levels, well, one of the theories that gets left out that I think has some good cause behind it is the hydrostatic plate shifting. That there's a theory that one of the reasons there was rapid rise or dropping in the tectonic plates was that it had to do with water eggs entering and ending up below the tectonic plates, and then at some point through a steam action or through another action that's caused a rapid shifting. But the idea that everything was under a mile of ice at all times, and where and when and how it receded or how it worked. I mean, we clearly have the P. Reese map. We haven't talked about that in a long time in Antarctica, and you have maps even to the 1500s, the P. Reese map in 1516 showing Antarctica with no ice. And we couldn't prove that out till the 1950s, 60s. So who's to say, one, where was the coastlines 6,000, 8,000, 15, 20, 30,000 years ago, and 50,000, we've talked about this extensively. I mean, all the maps I've created and all the research I've done, like Doggerland in Europe, our coastlines look dramatically different than they would for a society. We are not looking like, if we're telling the story of what was life 50,000 years ago, it wasn't in New York. I mean, in the sense that New York was not the coastline we see today. It's the difference between saying in the past 50,000 plus years ago, that's like saying Ohio is the coastline. And that's the difference, is that there is this massive snapshot of history. and whether the sciences each vertically place a value. Well, some sciences don't communicate well. I think like Michael Cremo talked about the last couple times when we were interviewing him, that anthropologists are not structural engineers, and telling a story about a society that you've dug up for 3% of it. I've gone on about that, and then applying in geology and saying, well, no, geology is a literally rock science. There's these 1, 2, 3s, but people take it for granted. I think just like, again, the story of out of Africa and our genetic history and this timeline snapshot of all the oceanic views, and saying, well, this is basically the coastlines everywhere. Well, that's not true. And just like those other theories, this idea that, well, 30,000 years ago, 40,000, 60,000 years ago, well, there's this much ice and it was in these locations, and here's why based on this geological evidence. It's not that there couldn't have been ice here and there. The issue is when you're finding these anomalous ruins and these rock walls, and I think something that I touch on it in my book, but North America was way more occupied, just like the lidar scans in Central America. All of North America, there's engineered soil. I did a lot of research on engineered soil.
May I respond? May I respond? Oh, you've given me so much. Jared, you and I think alike about a lot of things, but Jimmy and I found in Vermont there, you were talking about engineered soil on a couple of shows that you did previously. I was listening to you. You were talking about engineered soil. Okay, so where is there engineered soil? Well, we heard about this terra preta down in South America made with the pottery shards, and it's just acres and acres and hundreds of thousands of acres of this pottery shard, engineered soil. We were talking about engineered soil, but up in Vermont, in the farm areas, in the arable areas that you can find there in the mountainous regions, we found engineered soil. But instead of using pottery shards, what they're using is the local stone, the small stone in the area as a substitute for the pottery shards. So this engineered soil in the northeastern part of North America here, it's all over the northeastern part of America's here. When you dig up these areas, when you go to the farms up there in Vermont and you start digging into it, you can see clearly the soil is filled with rock, small rock, but seem evenly sized small rock. So Jimmy and I found evidence of engineered soil up there. And by the way, all the mounds that we find throughout the world, okay, all contain engineered soil. But engineered soil not for agricultural purposes, engineered soil for building purposes. There are mixtures of soils in these mounds. It's not just simply dirt. And this is one of the things that I go over on my channel as well, based on a research done by C.W. Saram, who is a writer who was the first writer to write about archaeology to Ed Lehman. Okay, very famous guy. He actually worked for the Nazis in the Ministry of Propaganda, but he came here to America. He wrote some books. He's a very famous guy to all archaeologists. So in any case, he had mentioned about this sort of thing going on in the Americas. Okay, so Cahokia, for example, okay, was the western part of it has sagged. So archaeologists and anthropologists determined that it had been repaired at one time because something happened to it. Some of these great cataclysms that were going on in the Americas at some time in the 1200s, sometime between 1100 and 1300, and also earlier as well. And you were talking about, okay, Charles C. Mann wrote a book, 1491, Revelations about the Americas before Columbus, okay, and about the amount of people who were here in the Americas before Columbus, okay, and by talking to all the anthropologists and archaeologists, he determined that, there was millions and millions and millions of people here. As a matter of fact, the Spanish historians in their accounts of the conquistadors' exploits there in Central America killed something. Their estimates say that the conquistadors and the Spanish there killed something between 14 million and 19 million people. That's their numbers, okay? That was the kind of, and there was reports of the explorers seeing bones bleached in the sun from the ocean as they sailed along the shoreline in the northeast here, because in the 100 years between when the explorers got here and the colonists and settlers finally got here 100 years later, disease and violence had claimed the lives of more than 95% of the native peoples that were here in the Americas. Okay, that's number one. Number two, Charles C. Mann, in his interviews of the archaeologists and anthropologists, he actually, flew down to South America. We got interviews with these archaeologists and anthropologists doing work in South America, where they've been finding civilly organized societies that are 20,000, 30,000, up to 40,000 years old, where one of these anthropologists, archaeologists told Mann, he said, maybe Sumeria is not the cradle of civilization. Maybe it's the Americas. Okay, and this is something I go on in the research that I do on my channel. They're always saying about how these influences to the Olmec were like African, and you have these Asian influences, and of course the native peoples have Asian DNA in their genes, etc. All this stuff or whatever, and I keep on going on in my channel that the New World bias that's going based on what Charles C. Mann was talking about through these anthropologists and archaeologists, this New World bias that it's the New World, New World, New World, okay, when it's really much older. Okay, and maybe it's not the New World at all, and maybe this is the much older world, and the rest of the world is the New World. This is what I go out on my channel, that the influences, the culture proliferated from the Americas, including, this goes back to the giants, with the Adena and then the Bell Beaker people who are in Europe, who lived approximately the same time. But this is another part where geologists get things wrong in the Americas. The Americas was totally destroyed by something, okay, in the past. And that's why we see scarce evidences of, but there are megalithic constructions here in the Americas. We covered that. But to get back to what Jared was saying also, I don't know if you know this or not, but we all know about the Ice Age and how it relates to the Bering Land crossing, okay? This is something that we were taught in school. Everybody knows about. Well, in 2019, the Smithsonian gave up on that idea. And why did the anthropologists and the archaeologists from the Smithsonian give up on this idea? Because no matter where they dug in the west coast of North America, they could not find the peoples or the animals that were crossing over the Bering Land Bridge at the times that they say or suspected that they did. Okay, according to the original theory. So now they've changed it. You can read it in the Smithsonian magazine. I've covered it on my channel. Now they believe that the people came by boat. Okay, so if cavemen came here 14 or 1,000 years ago or 12,000 years ago, okay, by boat, and at a time where the sea levels were much lower than they were, okay, may have been a quicker crossing than we might think, okay, then anybody in the past could come to the Americas by boat. If William Bligh could navigate 4,000 nautical miles in a 23-foot boat filled with men in open ocean, okay, anybody could come to the Americas at any time in the past. And this is something I go on in my channel, okay? Why is there evidence? Because you have people say, well, the Vikings were here, the Celts were here, the Phoenicians were here, the Egyptians were here, everybody and their mother, the Asians were here, everybody and their mother was here in the past. There seems to be little evidence of this here and there, but I covered this on my channel. How could they be colonizing the Americas if, according to Charles C. Mann's research and what Jared just said, there were millions and millions of people here? Well, it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with trade, okay? Trade, if you know anything about trade is a big thing. It was a big thing in America. We talk about the Hopewell exchange system, which was this huge trading network in the Americas, which had all these huge trails, which are now our main highways in the Americas, were these ancient Indian trails, which were really highways for trading. But people were trading with the Americas way back in the past. And this is one of the interesting videos that I do on my channel about the library at Alexandria. Why do I do it about the library at Alexandria? Well, evidently, okay, they could never locate the library at Alexandria, but there was a ship called the Syracusia. I don't know if you know about it, but it was designed by Archimedes, okay, and commissioned. It was a seagoing vessel, like the size of the Queen Mary, okay, and it just so happened to have a big library on board, okay. It was gifted to Ptolemy III, okay, and renamed the Alexandria. It had a giant library on board. It was a decommissioned ship sitting in the harbor at Alexandria when Caesar burned all the ships in the harbor of Alexandria. He burned the Syracusia, which was renamed the Alexandria, and just so happened to have a giant library on board. Okay, this is what I go on my channel. This is the sort of alternative ideas you'll hear on my channel based on, you know, general history, okay, that I cover on my channel. This is one of them. Okay, that the Library of Alexandria was the Syracusia, and it was a decommissioned ship, just like we have decommissioned ship today, like the Intrepid Museum in Manhattan, okay, a flat top, right? It's a museum, decommissioned ship. Well, the Alexandria, the Syracusia, was a decommissioned ship in Alexandria Harbor, and you can hear all about it. You can read about the history of it. But what's so interesting to me is that it had 60,000 pounds of corn on it, or 60,000 tons of corn on it. Well, how could it have 60,000 tons or pounds of corn on it if corn wasn't discovered until Christopher Columbus got here to the Americas? It's listed in the cargo manifest for the ship, yet, you know, this was centuries, you know, millennia before Columbus actually got to the Americas. How did they have corn? But it's listed in the manifest there. It was still researched by some lady academic who published. I go over it on my channel. This is what I propose, that the Library of Alexandria was burned in its birth in Alexandria, and that's what they can never find the physical structure of it. Okay, and why would a stone building burn? Yeah, everything in it could burn, but, you know, from one room to another, I don't think so. But if it was aboard a ship with a giant library and a giant reading room and a temple and buildings on it and mosaic floors throughout the ship, the size of the Queen Mary, okay, this is what it was. Well, how did they have corn on board? That's what's a mystery to me. And this is another thing that I cover on my channel as well. Corn, maize, okay? Corn is impossible, guys. You know that, right? Mike, Jared, you know that corn is impossible. The University of California call it the single greatest feat of genetic engineering ever, okay? Why do they do that? Because corn is impossible, okay? The cobs never drop from the stalks. How does it propagate itself? It can't. And even if animals eat it and excrete it somewhere and a plant grows, it can't grow, because if a cob does reach the ground, all the baby plants choke each other out and they all die, okay? Corn is an impossible plant, okay? They say it was invented 8,000 or 9,000 years ago in the highlands of Mexico, yet they found 80,000-year-old corn pollen, popping corn pollen there in Mexico when they were doing archaeological digs there. But corn itself is just impossible, and it's absolutely direct evidence of a previously more advanced civilization going on in the past, and maybe more recently than we think.
All right. Let's give Jared a chance to respond.
Oh, well, let's see. So we've talked about corn, and same deal. You know, it has to be man-made. It has to be man-managed. Scott Walter talks about it on America Unearthed. In Wisconsin, you have 9,000-year-old managed corn, and there's not supposed to be being non-nomadic people managing corn just in Wisconsin 9,000 years ago. That's not supposed to be a thing. So that, and I agree with what you're saying. I mean, we've talked about the great libraries. There were so many that were burned or destroyed or moved. Or I like the theory. I haven't heard the one about the boat. I think that's really interesting. Or ship, that it was on a ship.
Watch it on my channel, bro. Watch it on my channel. You'll enjoy that video. It's a popular one.
Yeah, and that sounds great. We've talked about the trade between continents. You've got to explain marijuana and cocaine in Egyptian mummies, and then furthermore, you have to explain why they do zero genetic research on the mummies on both continents, including the Paracas of Peru, which, even if it's not Brian Forrester's testing, the reality is it is an open elephant with a unicorn head to not discuss that. And we've discussed all of that, and the father of South American archaeology from Germany in the 1900s, Max Uli, who discussed in his 1900s lectures, which I include in my book, and we've talked about it extensively on different shows or different interviews and processes, that it was well known. What I don't understand is it's a common academic theme to forget or just don't teach the next generation what they already knew. And it was early accepted paleoanthropological, anthropological, archaeological news. It was known by the late 1800s. It was well accepted that the Chinese had been to South America, that the linguistics to Central America, South America, that it's just left out. It's like, don't touch that the Chinese were there. Don't touch that there's Roman amphoras and Roman galleons off the coast of Brazil. Don't explain the drug trafficking. And we've discussed the Terra Preta is in North Africa. It's in Australia. It's the same Terra Preta. But it's all...
Yep.
Yeah, and all of this in agreement, it's like you have to discuss the genetics, you have to discuss the trade routes, and they're clearly existing well prior. And then we haven't even touched, at least in a mainstream world, they finally got to the South American or the Central American Guatemalan lidar scans. And then even at National Geographic, I believe they finally deserve a gold star when they have an archaeologist, and more importantly, to call an actual local Central American Guatemalan archaeologist saying Western archaeology, and this is just paraphrasing his quote, Western archaeology has had a bias that South America and Central America was a place that cultures went to die. The truth is we need to finally, which, mind you, in another archaeological time when it was Max and the 1800s, early paleoanthropological, they knew that cultures had started in Argentina and South America and Central America, that there was evidence of people being there 30, 40, 50, like you said, 80, 100,000, Huaylaco, 300,000 years ago and more. But here we are with a modern archaeologist with 60,000 ruins being discovered in a 800 square mile out of a 5,000 square mile LiDAR scan just in Guatemala, for them to say, in quotes, we have grossly underestimated the populations here. We could, and mind you, this is a National Geographic article, so they still got to play it safe, right? And he says, we could easily estimate 15 to 20 million people. And just like you said, it's not a question. The fact is, it's fact that you've done the effort to go back and read the very first accounts, and we've talked about it too, the very first accounts of conquistadors, their assessments of the original populations, 3, 4, 5 times the size of the biggest, including Paris. The cities that they were seeing, and these are survivor, squatter cultures. This is the Aztecs and what's left of them.
Absolutely. The Mayans, like, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Mayan Rio Beck style. Okay, I covered this on my channel. There was a architectural professor from the University of Texas who went down and actually went into some of the places that the recent LiDAR is revealing. He had gone there years ago and found some of these places, and nobody ever heard about it. But this whole Mayan Rio Beck style is nonsense. It's clear that those buildings were rebuilt by the Mayans in their primitive mortar and stone style to repair them on these structures that were actually precisely cut block that looked like high-tech apartment buildings. And forget the researcher from Ancient Origins right now. This fellow, I've read quite a bit of his articles. You can see clearly in central Mexico cities, these ancient cities, like some of the main cities there, when you dig down further, the stone constructions get more precise, when you get older. They're more precise.
Every time.
So the Mayans were just like the Inca. They stumbled upon these buildings, and they rebuilt them with these monster mouths. And those are all part of the rebuild of these finely constructed, with finely cut and dressed stone structures that were just incredible, unbelievable, beautiful buildings. You got to watch that video on my channel too about the Mayan Rio Beck style. I cover it on my channel as well. I back up all my research with all mainstream research. I mean, just in what you just said alone, I have so much to say about all of the subjects that you just touched on, in the research that I do on my channel, because, I'm done with this whole new world junk and whatnot. The camel and the horse come from the Americas, they say hundreds of millions of years ago, but even if it was hundreds of millions of years ago, we have no idea what this planet was like hundreds of millions of years ago. There could have been a dozen advanced societies in the past, just as technologically advanced as ours, et cetera, okay? It seems to be that, all evidence for this throughout the world, okay, of more technically advanced, but could that have been the only one? It could have been a dozen of them in the past, okay? We have no idea.
Right.
Right.
It could have been fractional. It could have just been one society, and after multiple disasters or weaponized disasters of, they could have separated, and ultimately you did have isolations. But those are all, everything you're saying. It's what's important is that there are people like us out there doing the research, where I think there are people interested in hearing about it and learning about it. And one of the things sorry to interrupt, but one of the things you had said, I think, is super important. The North American, the location of the camel is North American. And I know there's like a dozen animals that all magically disappear around.
And the horse.
And they all disappear. The ancient ones, and like the giant North American bear, I think the leopard or the cheetah. Which one was it that was from here too?
Well, we had the saber-toothed tigers here in North America.
Well, I think we also had. I think there was one other one.
We had a couple. We had more than a few cats. I've seen them through my research because I go over the megafauna. And by the way, just to respond to something you said before, when archaeologists and anthropologists, they did 76 different digs in North America trying to determine what these people were eating in the past, I guess during, what they say is Paleo times or Neolithic times or whatever it was, okay? So they dug 76 sites. They only found evidence for large mammal predation in 14 of the 76 sites. They found no evidence of mammal predation in any of those sites, okay? Just to let you know, more also in tandem with the evidence about the giants with their perfect teeth, which are dug up in these skulls. They just have perfect teeth every time, and every time they see them, they're like, these people couldn't have possibly be eating meat. Okay, because meat gets stuck in between your teeth. It's just, they were eating a lot of fish, okay? When they find these bell beaker people in Europe, okay, they have shells and things from 200 miles from the coast, and they have necklaces of salmon bones. They find, back to the Northeast here, okay? If you think the lidar scans of South America are phenomenal, I mean, you got to look at the ones of the northeastern part of North America, bro.
Oh yeah,
guys, this is the biggest mega city ever on the planet. It is represented by the stone walls of northeastern part of America. I mean, I have a video on my channel, okay? This is the 8th wonder of the world, okay? The entire northeastern part, if you look at the LiDAR scans of it and you see what this looks like from above, it's just, without seeing it, I can't describe it to you. It's just unbelievable. Okay, and it has everything to do with trade, and back to that too, where they find evidences of the Vikings, the Celts, the Phoenicians, the Egyptians, whoever it was. I mean, like I said, if Smithsonian is willing to admit now that the cavemen came here by boat, the native peoples came here by boat, then anybody could have come here by boat in the past. Okay, so when we talk about trade, and you're heavily into this whole ancient trade thing, okay? So you understand this. When the Romans conquered Europe, okay, and they went someplace or whatever, when you establish trade with another country and you have all these goods and raw materials and whatever it might be coming into your country, okay, you're reliant on it. You have to secure your trade because another country could attack the country that you're doing trade with, and you don't want that happening, okay? So what are you going to send it? You're going to do what the Romans did. You're going to put a garrison there, okay, to ensure the trade, okay? This is just 101 economics, okay? If you've been to college or whatever, you don't understand that trade establishes certain dynamics, okay? So without any question, okay, so do you know about John Jensen's work with ancient canals at all?
Yeah, like, or are you talking about the canals like in Arizona and Florida, like you said, from lidar
Yeah,
slash satellite
but
scans?
his main focus was Long Island, okay, because we have 5 or 6 artificial harbors here on Long Island that are 2,000 by 3,000 feet, okay, along with canals, and also the Native American myths of King Mangatuxi, who is king of the Montaukett tribe here on Long Island, okay. He was a giant, okay, by folklore, okay. He was a gigantic person of gigantic form, and according to legend, he built a canal here on Long Island. Okay, so this is according to the Montaukett tribe here on Long Island. It's according to John Jensen, who sees all these canals all over Long Island area, New York area here, along with these artificial harbors. So the last time the water level was down so these artificial harbors could be used would be some 7,000 to 8,000 years ago. Okay, so what would Native American peoples be needing with 2,000 and 3,000 foot artificial harbors here on Long Island? Okay, which there are no stone walls, by the way, here on Long Island, one of the only places here in this part of New York where there is absolutely no stonework. But there's plenty of artificial harbors and canals and the legends of Native peoples to go along with it. So, look, the stone walls themselves represent part of this trade, okay? Reasons why they find Vikings and Celts and Romans and Egyptians and Phoenicians is because everybody and their mother was trading with the millions and millions and millions of tens and millions and hundreds of millions of people who are here in the Americas, okay? They were trading with them. And to ensure your trade, you have to garrison. There's no ands, ifs, or buts. We have here in this country right now, at every airport that you could possibly go to, international airport anyway, you're going to find a trade zone at that airport where people from other countries, they go inside these gated areas where there are no American citizens, okay? And these are all part of big business, foreign governments, etc., in these trade zones, okay? This is what's happening today. This is what the dynamics of trade causes, okay? So when they find evidence of Vikings and Egyptians, of course they do. This is where they garrison. They have to guarantee safety, just like we do today. No different than we do today. They have to ensure the safety of the nation that they're trading with, right? They might be attacked by their enemy. The trading routes might be attacked. They can't afford that, right? Their societies are dependent upon these natural resources, whatever they may be. Okay, so why do you find evidence of not trying to colonize here? They just garrisoned here like anybody would do any time in the past. Okay, this is the kind of thing I go over on my channel where, I try to cut down on the romanticism, whether it be mainstream or alternative, because you have it existing in both. Okay, so everything is astronomically aligned. Everything has a ceremony. No, they don't. Some just have very practical uses. Okay, people go into these flights of fancy because they watch too much History Channel, the government approved History Channel, who, by the way, 20 or 30 years ago put a disclaimer on their channel and said our channel is not necessarily about history or facts. Our channel is about entertainment. They had to put it on there because they didn't want to get in trouble. Okay, I'm sure a lot of people didn't see that, but I saw it. Okay, I used to watch the History Channel a lot. I don't watch it at all now because it's nothing but these are all the rabbit holes, ancient aliens, UFOs, whatever it is they present on the History Channel. That is absolutely rabbit hole government propaganda. I don't care what it is, okay? You hear the things I talk about UFOs on my channel. You never hear that on there, but everybody knows about it through Wilhelm Reich and Trevor James Constable. Everybody knows about it who's into the UFOs or whatever, but you never hear anything about that on the History Channel because that's what the real story is. UFOs aren't spaceships from other planets or whatever it is. They're creatures that live in space. And they do everything that animals on this planet. They're bioluminescent, bioelectric, and biomechanical. This is not an unusual idea in science fiction or whatever it is. Have you watched Farscape? Well, Maya, the ship Moya, right? She's a biomechanical organism, okay? Biomechanical organisms live in space. Every time, what's his face in a national UFO, I forget, he's on Coast to Coast, Peter Davenport, every time he gives a report of a UFO, I'm streaming at the radio. The thing is acting like an animal. And they're always shooting these beams at each other, just like dolphins shoot a beam at their head when they get their prey, like the tiger's infrasound roar. Okay, they always see these little beams, the orange ones and green ones, fighting with each other up there. Well, they can use that to communicate, or they can use that to kill. Okay, this is the whole thing. Okay, we were romanticizing everything. I just did one. You guys were talking about Elon Musk, or somebody was talking about Elon Musk or whatever, and he came out with this thing about aliens built the pyramids. No, they didn't. Giants did. Giants built the giant. This is why the Iroquois called them stone giants, not because they were made of stone, not because they had stone armor, because they worked with stone. That's what the giants do. Okay. That's what the giants did in the past. They worked with stones. And a lot of people, I think Graham Hancock says that giants built the pyramids, okay? Block in itself. We have block today, construction block, brick, block. That's engineered ergonomically for us to use. Well, what is the average size of block of the pyramids, okay? The main pyramid, which is 8-sided, by the way. Those compound angles had to be done there. 8-sided pyramid, it's inverse 8-sided pyramid, okay? They're 2.3 tons, okay? Some of these giants who are 12 and 14 feet tall weighed like 3,000 pounds, okay? We're always trying to figure out how we did all of these things. This is something I go on my channel. This is a sort of alternative research you hear on my channel, okay? We're always thinking about how we did whatever it is, us, Homo sapiens, but we didn't do it, you see? We didn't build these megalithic structures. We're always trying to figure out how we did it, but we're wasting all our time going down these rabbit holes trying to figure out how we did it when we didn't do it. Somebody else did it. Other hominids who specialized in these crafts. Just like people all over this planet specialize in all kinds of things over this planet. The giants were called stone giants for the Iroquois, not because they were made out of stone, because they worked with stone. That's what they did. And all the doming and everything else, they're a contest of strength. I go over this on my channel. I'm not the originator of these ideas, guys. You know, these ideas are talked about, but you never hear about them on the History Channel or in textbooks or anything because they don't want you to know about that. That's what the real story is.
All right. I want to take a step back for a second, and I want to ask you, Jared, the engineered corn. If we engineered corn, what would it take to engineer corn? What would it take today to do that?
It's like basically we're talking about ancient Monsanto.
I specialize on this on my channel, by the way. I specialize in corn. I have any number of videos about corn, including Huitlacoche. Do you know what Huitlacoche is?
No.
Huitlacoche is a fungus that is specific to corn, and it's so rare. And it just happens to be the perfect scientific experimental organism. It just so happens to be that, and that certain kinds of research into breast cancer was derived from this Huitlacoche. It's so rare, and it's a delicacy down there. It's called an ancient Aztec food. Okay, they eat the corn. It's called corn mushrooms too. Okay, they're like corn truffles, but they're so rare. And first of all, there's no. It would cost millions upon millions. We can't do it today, guys. This is the whole point: is that despite all of our genetic engineering prowess, there is no way for us to take a blade of grass with a seed on it and develop it into corn, okay? And think about the process that went into doing that, okay? How many centuries did it take to develop corn? So, okay, so you're cavemen, okay, running around 9,000 years ago in the highlands of Mexico, which where they say it originated, okay? You're cavemen with all these giant creatures around trying to survive and everything. And just for kicks, you're taking a plant and growing it and devoting all your time to that. It has basically no yield. Okay, not yet anyway, right? Because you're trying to develop it. Okay, so you're taking a crop, devoting all your time to a crop that has practically no yield or value whatsoever to try to develop into corn. And this is what you were doing as cavemen 8,000 and 9,000 years ago. I don't think so.
All right, Jared.
Where?
Can you?
Yeah.
Continue?
So where? Well, sorry. Go ahead.
Can you answer my question?
Yeah. There's a lot of things like corn. One of the things that so there are weird genetic. We could go on. We could do a whole series on weird genetic cuts, not only in the human genome, but in not just corn, like sequoia. A lot of people think of the great sequoia in California and
everything, Jared, everything. The top 8 foods in the world come from the Americas, whether it be potatoes or, certain types of vegetables. Okay, 8 of the top foods come from the Americas. They're all genetically engineered, okay? Or they're genetically enhanced. We can trace their roots to their plants, and including all the domesticated animals, and including all the cryptids, including Bigfoot, all genetically engineered. All cryptids are all genetically engineered. They were designed like Monsanto. They were designed not to reproduce, but obviously life gets around that. It's probably hard for them to reproduce, okay? That's why we don't find them in copious numbers.
My question was to Jared, what it would take to genetically create corn from nothing.
So programming any kind, whether it's a tree like metasequoia or corn or like Honeycrisp, that was developed at the University of Minnesota by a scientist that I actually know. He's actually developed over, I think at this point, 40 or 50 vegetables and fruits. And so it's a lot of people like to think of genetics or anything, a very modern way to look at it, but a superstitious way is to think alchemy, that you're just going to mix a few things and you're going to, add the frog tail or whatever, add up a bunch of magical recipe and then boom, you get something. That's not how this works. They're understanding right down to the DNA level what they have to include or split or splice, like cloning with human like genetically modifying. Like right now we've cloned animals, but we have designer babies now. They have to actually, somebody at some point in antiquity, so not the people stacking boulders or readapting and reusing these ancient high tech. We're talking way back, like we've been talking about somebody way back.
More advanced. Just a more advanced society that was there in the past.
It sounds like, Jared, that in order for a civilization to invent and create corn, they would need a lot more than the Baghdad battery and a pyramid.
Just to repeat, I just want to repeat this, okay? The researchers who researched corn at the University of California, Southern California, okay? This is in Charles C. Mann's book, okay? They call it, based on their research, they call it man's single greatest genetic engineering ever. That's what they say.
Yeah, I know that.
So they're not giving an do they have a hypothetical theoretical explanation as to what was?
They don't know. They're trying the two plants that they think that they were derived from.
That's what I was asking. Yep.
The two plants that they think that they were derived from. They're very controversial. We have some scientists who are for it, many scientists who are against it. Charles C. Mann goes over it in his book, 1491. He gets into it. He interviews some of these people and whatnot. So, put it this way: it's what we're talking about genetic engineering today is based on something we have already. Okay, not something we're creating out of nothing. Okay, it's you're taking a base form and developing it into corn would not only take hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, but it would take years and years and years and years. But yet they say it was invented 8,000 to 9,000 years ago in the highlands of Mexico. This is my question then. So if you're caveman running around and you're starving, okay, and and that whole hunter-gatherer thing, just throw that in the garbage. There's so much evidence for agriculture going into the ancient past. It just was carried on from these more advanced civilizations going forward. That's all. There was never any hunter-gatherers. People had to do it when they were traveling or whatever. You can't grow anything as you're traveling around and migrating and all this kind of stuff. So, like I said, they dug up 76 sites. They couldn't find any evidence of mammalian predation here. That's all mainstream science, okay? So, look, if they were trying to develop corn today, it would take not only hundreds of millions of dollars, it would take years and years and years of research to do it just to develop one plant.
Do you see anything in animals that you think that they may have engineered? Do you see anything with the same?
Well, we have no idea where domestic animals come from. Absolutely no idea who did it, when, or whatever. So, besides genetic engineering, people with the capability of genetic engineering can also do biological enhancing. So, these animals were probably clearly biologically enhanced in some ways genetically.
So the way you get the chicken before the egg is you engineer something that lays eggs, because otherwise you don't have a chicken.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's the case, is that the same technology to develop frequency and muted megalithic cymatic polygonal constructions. And what do you estimate your thoughts, irrelevant to giants, what do you think the estimates are, irrelevant to lifting, what do you consider the technologies involved in just measuring and creating the polygonal construction, the tools, the hand tools that would have been used
I have a couple of very interesting videos on geopolymers, very popular ones, by the way, based on an article done by the University of Utah about Roman concrete. And we often see in these articles that, most of them are titled in a way to catch, grab you and whatnot. And most of these articles always say solved, right? Solved, the mystery of Roman concrete. And when you read the research and all that kind of stuff, they haven't solved it at all. They found what the ingredients are for Roman concrete, but they can't seem to find out how to mix it so that it becomes this Roman concrete. And I go over on my channel and I say that they used electricity, that the Romans knew everything about electricity. They touched the doorknob like we did. They saw lightning. They were using lightning to cure concrete. And I go over an article today, a contemporary article, about how they use electricity to cure concrete faster and make it harder. Okay, this is what they're missing from that. But I go over that on my channel, that these probably geopolymers, okay, I mean, especially when you look at Saskatchewan down there in South America and these other places where you see it's like smoothing on the stones there, it seems to me that they were probably poured in place with like a sheet of wax paper between them that rotted out over the centuries or whatever, and that's all they needed to do this stuff. They were pouring this stuff. They had knowledge of geopolymers, okay? Just like we have corian today, right? We have our own geopolymer. Why couldn't people do that? They obviously knew about mortar, so many of the South American, they must have got that from somewhere. Okay, it seems like all these things are geopolymer, and what they're missing is that it was cured with electricity. They knew everything about electricity in the past, how easy it is to use. You just, you make a concrete thing and put up a lightning rod on it at the right time of year or whatever. It gets hit by the lightning a few times. So you think about it. If you had to cure something that weighed 200 tons, how long is that going to take to cure? It's going to take a long time. So I have a video on my channel called the Tartarian free energy geopolymers, which is, just like throw the idea out there that this was being done in the past, and this is what they're missing. This is why they can't cure the Roman concrete, right? It's because they're missing that part of it. Yeah, they know what it's made of, but they can't seem to mix it right or put it together. So why would that be? We're in the 21st century now. Can't you figure it out?
Let me ask you a question, Budcat. Do you think that the ancient people that lived on this earth are still currently visiting us in UFO craft?
No, because I don't believe in UFO craft. I only believe in what Wilhelm Reich was talking about and Trevor James Constable when he wrote his book, They Live in the Sky. Okay? And I go over this on my channel. I give evidences for it. There's more evidence that these things are creatures that live in space. And there's other creatures that live in our atmosphere, too. Okay? When you look at the creatures on this planet and what they can do, we always want to say we're so evolved, okay? So is our sense of smell more evolved than the animals? Is our other mammals, is our eyesight more developed? Is anything, our strength? Only thing evolved about us may be our brain. Maybe, I don't know. They say that dolphins are more intelligent than us.
So you think these
UFOs communicate to each other with telepathy? That's why you always see this thing about Bigfoot and UFOs, because Bigfoot probably communicates with telepathy. Bigfoot is another genetically engineered. But just like we are, we're genetically engineered too. We were genetically engineered to probably be the companions to these giant peoples, okay, who seem more advanced. If they passed on their more socially advanced culture to the Iroquois, they were more socially advanced, okay? So they're also technologically advanced when they were living in that technologically more advanced society, which might have been Atlantis, Lemuria, all those things. C.W. Saram said in his book, he said, if we come across Atlantis, we probably wouldn't recognize it, but in any case,
if the giants were so advanced, why did they have to make everything out of stone?
Well, they were destroyed. Their civilization was destroyed. Think about us today, okay? You've seen so many post-apocalyptic videos or whatever, okay? You've seen on the Science Channel or whatever, they say if New York was abandoned right now, it would be gone in 10,000 years. You wouldn't even know it was there. Okay, with our construction or whatever, but they were totally destroyed. They probably only had remnants of knowledge from their past. How even your whole society was destroyed. I mean, the whole surface of the planet was completely destroyed. I mean, there's evidence of them tracing the genetic tracing back to like 28 people after one of these cataclysms. Randall Carlson goes over it in his research with the cataclysms, okay? People got more advanced and there was a cataclysm. They're more advanced. What would you do if there was a cataclysm? Can you, make a car right away or a lawnmower? I mean, what would you do? I mean, you would do the best you could, okay? But evidently, it seems that they were much more advanced in, let's say, mathematics, engineering, astronomy, language. As a matter of fact, Iroquois language is very similar to Basque. Okay, a philologist from Canada made this distinction some time ago. Okay, that's pretty advanced. So, look, what would we do? I mean, after a couple of 100 years, what would be left? I mean, of our cars or whatever it is, they all be, banged down into spears or whatever it is. And iron disappears after a while, and everything metal goes away except for gold and silver, whatever. But look, it's, if your whole civilization is destroyed, all you can do is the best that you can.
Well, what about the idea that the giants are really the offspring of angel human hybrids?
I can't take that jump. That's too much of a jump. Let's just go with what we know, what evidences we can find of the giants. Certainly there was many eras of the giant, epochs of the giants, where they devolved from their high, biggest form down to a lower form. This gravity must have changed on this planet. Stephen Hurrell from the UK goes over it on his channel. They're always trying to explain how the dinosaurs could have lived in our gravity. It seems impossible that they could live in our gravity. So the gravity must have been different in the past. I did research on my channel into gravitational biology, okay, when they do the experiments in space. When there is less gravity, cells grow bigger. When there's more intense gravity, they grow smaller. Okay, so when all of these megafauna animals in a much lighter gravity were able to grow in that much lighter gravity, they couldn't adapt when the gravity became more intense. And there's many more lists beyond the megafauna. The megafauna is what you hear about. But if you look at that of a certain weight and a certain size and everything, but there were so many animals with the giant moniker in front of it that were not that size, but were giant for their for their species at the time. You don't hear about any of those, but they all devolved, but had contemporary. Most of them had contemporary, but also they had animals that were so weird and bizarre and everything else. And this is where we talk about dragons and everything else. Sure, there was talk about dragons. There were weird animals living here in the Holocene, in the early Holocene, where obviously we were around and these big people were around.
All right. Budcat, I'm going to ask you to just hang on a second. I want to ask Jared a question. Jared, what he's saying about gravity is actually really interesting. What do you think about the possibility that the gravity on Earth is different now than it was in the past?
Well, I think it's possible. It ties in. The wobble of the Earth, the rotation, the tilt, all of it. There are theories of different. Look, we have a giant 19-mile diameter crater in Greenland. That's just one. Then we have the Yucatan hit, which they thought was the dinosaur killer, and then we have there's internal pyrotechnics with plate shifting and volcanic stuff, but external, the type of things that have hit this planet to throw it or change it. We have gravitational, we have the Kepler belts, we have rotational considerations in reference to whether or not we're an actual binary star system. All of these things tie into how the Earth moves and how gravity could change. But one of the things, as we all do this research, and we're juggling so many, not us right now, but in the research that all of us are doing and the questions we ask a lot of people we work or talk to, the issue is a society that's highly advanced, that's engineering soil, that's engineering plants, that's engineering animals, that's engineering themselves to maybe suit specific jobs. This is not a society that's stopped at stone construction. They clearly were measuring and using instrumentation to calculate the frequencies and resonance. And again, they're not doing this through an alchemy. They're doing this through the exact programmable science of mitochondrial DNA, which means that if they're terraforming the planet and they're also programming the animals, we're talking about at any point a snapshot in a global advanced society, just like now that we've talked about with 150 tribes we leave alone. There's always going to be something that's going to blur the lines where if this was a benevolent society, there's a chance that worldwide there could still be tribes that would leave evidences that are more primitive to throw off the scent and go, oh, well, they were primitive at one point, or they only advanced to one layer because the higher portions of that technology that wasn't the glass, the metals, the wires, it would all rust away, and all that would be left would be the megalithic work. But in genetic history, we have a lot of weird anomalies in animals, people, and things.
Yes.
So the idea of them terraforming the planet and managing the animals, the insects, the bacteria, the viruses, what we're seeing as a nature, in quotes, is again a large biological computer that's now in safe mode, because I think just like everything else they engineered, it wasn't an issue. They had groomed and terraformed the planet in its entirety, and either between a natural or multiple natural and or a weaponized catastrophe between them, or a combo of it all, they were not able to recover a global society. So my opinion, again, well, it's my book. It's not aliens worse, it's us. The issue is,
I love that. I love that. I love the title of that book.
Yeah,
love
thanks.
Hey,
It's that's the issue, is that these people that are in, it's not even a disagree or agree. If there are advanced humans, to assume that they've either devolved or that if I'm going to take a 0-point turn, you know me, I've said this over and over. If I'm going to take a 0-point turn in a Mach 30 vessel, I might want to program my genes to be shorter, to be gray, and have big eyes that have onboard direct connection to hair point pin calculated turns. And we already have weapon systems on F-22s that are brain connected to the pilots. The weapon systems. So,
but they still can't do what insects and animals do. And I talk about this on my channel too. Okay, so look, those hairpin turns at 6,000 and 10,000 miles an hour, it's impossible for anything to be living in there. Because I can tell you this: if I took you and shrunk you down like a Fantastic Voyage to a little miniature guy, and strapped you on the back of a dragonfly, okay, an insect that lives on this planet. Okay, a dragonfly can accelerate at full speed instantly and can change direction instantly at full speed, 27 miles an hour. Okay, if I strap you down and put you on that dragonfly, okay, you'd be dead in about a minute. The G-forces would tear you apart. Okay, but it doesn't tear the dragonfly apart now, does it? Okay. These animals that live in space can do the same thing as animals can do on this planet. Okay,
so when you're
it
saying
accelerate instantly. This is where I go into 411. Why is the pants and shoes always missing? Well, this thing grabs somebody and accelerates to 2,000 miles instantly. Guess what's going to be left behind? Okay, if somebody gets caught in a flash flood, what's the first thing that happens to them? Their pants and shoes come off. Okay. Look, these things are animals. They act like animals. They're able to paralyze you while you're paralyzed there in bed. Like the movie Arrival, these octopus creatures are trying to communicate with a big Q or whatever it is. Look, we don't know what they're trying to say in our head. They're trying to communicate. They're probing us, and the only way we can make any sense of it is by making up the scenario while we're paralyzed in our bed or in the seat in the airplane or whatever it is. And we fantasize, our brain tries to interpret it just like the cargo cult people try to interpret what they saw. That's what these animals and creatures are doing to us. Okay, they're intelligent, like dolphins. They say that dolphins are more intelligent than us. But what do they need? A train or a plane or a car for? They don't. They just swim around the ocean and play and reproduce and eat their food, and that's all they need to do. They don't need to drive around in a car or make a spear or anything like that. But they have big giant brains, bigger than ours and more advanced than ours.
Budcat, we're running out of time, but I just gotta ask you, what you're saying is that the UFOs that we're seeing today are really its own living creature?
Yes. They're living creatures. You ever hear the vast ocean of space? I mean, how many science fiction stories have you read or seen about things that live in space? Look, if things on this planet can live in the darkest depths of the oceans and in Antarctica or whatever, why can't they live in space? It doesn't make any sense. Life is so prolific. I don't understand why people wouldn't think this. This is what Wilhelm Reich thought. And this is what Trevor James Constable thought based on Wilhelm Reich's book and his orgone energy and everything, that these are ethereal creatures, the things that live in our atmosphere, okay? The animals on this planet have all the attributes that these animals have. They're bioluminescent creatures that make their own light. The midshipman fish on the west coast that eagles eat all the time. If you look at it in the water, it looks like Moya from Farscape, okay? Little portholes on the sides of its body. Okay, so they're bioluminescent, bioelectric, and biomechanical. What's so hard to? We have creatures just like that on our planet that look like aliens. But they're not aliens. They're not ships. They're not craft. They're living creatures that live in space. I go over it in so many videos. I give so much evidence for that. There's so much more proof for that than their spacecraft from other dimensions or other planets. There's so much more evidence that these things are alive and live in space than there are for anything else. And that's why you never hear it on the History Channel. Have you ever heard that on the History Channel? It's been around since Wilhelm Reich. It's been around since the 40s or 50s. Wouldn't that make for interesting programming? Why isn't it on the History Channel? Well, I'll tell you why it's not on the History Channel, because that's what it really is. Okay? No ancient aliens and all this kind of stuff. The aliens, whoever they are, got the same problem as us. How can you transverse space? You know, with any kind of technology, it would require the energy of like 20 suns or something like that. How are you going to harness that as a living creature? Okay, these things are probably silicon-based life forms, okay? They're probably eating the sand on Earth that they don't know where is going at. They've done so much research. Where is the sand going? You're probably eating that stuff, okay? There's early reports of this thing's dropping slag out of it. You know, there's one report over that lake in Oregon or whatever, one of the earliest reports of UFOs. Okay, these things are creatures. They fly in groups like birds. Come on, guys. This is what's being kept from you, okay? All that other stuff is rabbit hole nonsense that they give to you on the government-approved History Channel, okay? Who do you think is overseeing these things, okay?
All right. Hang on a second. Jared, what do you think of that idea?
Well, the idea of, again, creatures, we've just found our first creature in the ocean that doesn't breathe oxygen. We know that there are different ways to create life. One of my favorite things recently is they've figured out how to create brick from living bacteria. They know how to program brick to grow in a format that is however you want the brick to look. So one of the things I always talked about is imagine a technology where you see a satellite that looks like we talked about this with Olaf Phillips. You know, it's it's the idea of that, what we think of as a metal device filled with a bunch of wires and programming could look way more like an asteroid, something that's self-sustaining and involves sun technology and solar, but it's made out of a living and bacteria and viruses and things that are programmable that ultimately create something that appears like, oh, that's just a dumb rock, but in reality it's a living, moving flash drive that is flying through space, collecting information, and is a living satellite.
What are planes based on? What are submarines based on? Planes are based on birds. Submarines are based on fish. Where do we get those ideas from? Well, we get them from living animals.
I think in our phase of development, in our rediscovery, that's what's happened. But this ancient advanced society, if we table, okay, well, they can manipulate genes, they can change and mutate and also program genes and terraform the planet, and they can create people up or down. When you point to something,
maybe even pull the moon into our orbit to protect us,
or build it. Or build it. Maybe it is hollow, and maybe they can move 3,000-ton stones without any issue. And so, how much harder is it to build? Maybe something like the moon, or grow it with like a living rock, like the Romanian growing stones. But so what we get lost in translation when we're looking at the idea of, hey, is this a well, they're different, but they're bioluminescence. Well, what I hear is, in reference to his question about what do I think about the theory, it's a theory, and obviously it should still be on the table for theories. What we do know is that anything that's bioluminescence, I'm not going to assume. Again, we're living on what I think is a broken giant living organic computer that was once a terraformed project for an advanced human race, which means that when we have a bioluminescent animal or something, that's a remnant of a technology that was programmed, that it's not a random...
Maybe the UFOs, so maybe the creatures that live in space are part of that. Maybe they were technology. Maybe we could use the animals like we use elephants to build things or whatever it is. So these things have some sort of magnetic grip or something. This is why David Paulides always says, well, they weren't carried off by big birds because big birds have talons and they would rip into the flesh, et cetera, et cetera. So let's say these bioluminescent, what I call biomechanoids that live in space, okay, that they're mostly based on electromagnetism, that this is how they would grip something with an electromagnetic field. They don't need appendages to do it. They can do it simply magnetically, okay, through the phenomena of magnetism comes from the process of electricity. This is where the phenomena comes from. Okay, if you follow the Thunderbolts channel anyway, this is what you're going to learn there. So maybe these creatures, this is my theory about 411 that David Paulides doesn't know about, because I don't write him with 20 pages and say, hey, Dave, look at this. I just presented it on my channel and said, look, this is what's grabbing. And they did a study and said that whatever's doing this stuff is predatory. So look, I say they're creatures that live in space, and they could be remnants. I mean, I say Bigfoot is, okay? Who mined the 500 million pounds of copper that they don't know where it went to out of the Michigan Peninsula, okay? Why, instead of creating robots, let's say this more advanced society in the past was more organically minded in their technology than we might be today, okay? Based on the genetic engineering that you and I both believe happened in the past, okay? And I believe I'm more in line with what you believe, that this is one giant, super biological computer or something like that, okay? That's meant to run in a certain way, okay? That gave rise to these creatures, okay? So look, if you want to see more evidence about that, look on my channel, okay? I give tons of evidence. Not only the fact that animals on this planet can camouflage themselves against the backdrop of a clear blue sky with clouds on it. I'm sure that would be pretty easy for some of these animals, okay? That's why they disappear into thin air. But you're absolutely right. I'm totally in line with what you're thinking, and you're more affirming what I've been saying all along on my channel. That all of these major domestic animals and foods and everything have all been biologically engineered, okay? And that terra preta, and by the way, just back to Cahokia, which is another thing, that the people that they say built Cahokia are not the people who built it, because their repair sag. They think that they only used earth, okay? You just pile it in piles there, it's going to stay there. No, it's because all of the mounds were genetically engineered. They're not genetic, they were engineered materials, okay? Some of the mounds, they actually had the dynamite because they had layers of clay in them so thick and so hard it was like concrete, okay? So not only is the soil engineered for agricultural purposes, they were engineering the soil to use for the mounds as well. And that's why the mounds had their long-lasting properties and just didn't disappear, because they always say if they were just simply earth, they would just simply all disappear, but they weren't. They were engineered soils used, or engineered materials used to build the mounds, just like the terra preta, only used for construction purposes.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that it wasn't just for growing soil. And in North America and in Central and in across Europe, they're called Chernozyms, and it's an engineered soil, but this is a soil that has the same qualities of piezoelectric, so it's communication and or electromagnetic current capable. It is heavy metal filtering. It is capable of filtering carbon dioxide and also fertilizers. And it's eerily self-sustaining.
Just for your information, that the engineered soils up in Vermont there contain a lot of quartz and there's a lot of quartz in the walls up there as well. White quartz evidently is some sort of revered stone to these ancient people or large hominids or whoever they were, but a lot of the engineered soil up there is filled with quartz. So just think about the electrical properties of quartz. We had gone over this a few times on the radio, Jimmy and I, my fellow researcher up here in Springfield, Vermont, that these soils were electric, and they added a lot of quartz stone to the soil as their terra preta up there. Just for your information.
That's great to hear, because one of my primary interests, having a background in construction, and I don't know if you've heard this, any of the stuff you listen to that we've talked about.
I have a background in construction and engineering and architectural. I studied all that in school. You know, I'm a college graduate, dean's list, honors list, you know, just pat myself on the back.
That's good to hear you didn't get caught. The in all seriousness about the megalithic, the cymatic polygonal construction stuff, one of the things that I've maintained is when we built, well, you know, being in the upper half of our country, and I'm in Minnesota, we build basements. And when we build basements and we build foundations, we pre-compact the soil. And something I've been trying to educate people on about our ancient megalithic past is that the technology to make sure that these buildings, despite the even dynastic periods of thousands of years of not being on level, that not only do you have to pre-compact the soil, but seismic metamaterials, which are engineered down to a nano size to large, these are materials that you would put into a foundational structure in current sciences called seismic metastructures to keep a building safe and muted from earthquakes, but it can also have piezoelectric properties. So if you have an engineered soil that can communicate electromagnetic currents, but in reference to the foundation of megalithic structures, just to put it on your radar, the idea would be is not only are they pre-compacting it to, per se, a percentage of 90%, I have a feeling, and what I'm more excited to hear about, you're the first person in 5 years of research that has told me that in this engineered soil, there's a stone, and something that Jennifer Deo, an archaeologist, and I have been going over and planning for our upcoming dig when things calm down, is that I want core sampling of the actual pre-compaction material under all megalithic structures must be and could be. What if it's not like in a normal home right now? You're a standard house in half of America is a footing that is maybe a couple feet wide max. It's pre-compacted to maybe 2 feet. It might be at a depth that's very low, but the pre-compaction to set your foundational wall, for everyone listening, is minimal. It's only a couple materials. It's basically a gravel road material. It's pre-compacting the soil or sand or clay, and then you build your wall. It's almost nothing. But what if under these megalithic buildings that are billions of tons, that this is a pre-compacted soil that is made up of material that could be a crushed granite from 10,000 miles away? What if it's a crushed shell from Brazil, but it's in Egypt? But we literally have done no core sampling. When archaeology got going, it's about the mummies, it's about the gold, it's about these objects.
It's about the exciting stuff. You know, that's real exciting. This stuff that you're talking about is a wet blanket, because nobody wants, you know, that's
it's not sexy.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, not sexy. But for you, though, I wanted to put it on your radar. One of the biggest things I'm concerned of is anytime you find something megalithic, and as a builder, think about it. Nobody thinks about the tech. What if we core sample the foundational material, the pre-compaction layer below the megalithic wall, and it turns out it's 20 different sands, crystals, quartzes? What if it's like something that's completely foreign to the area? And what if it's pre-compacted consistently to maybe not even 99% or 90%? What if it's not even the level of compaction? What if it is, but what if it's the complexity of the material and its ability to have piezoelectric properties and how it connects to the surrounding soil? And as you move away from the building, you are exactly dead on. In your research, it's overlapping with mine in that engineered soil wasn't just about having the greatest growing soil that we've never been able to duplicate. The Chernozems, these engineered soils that are in North America, in Canada, the Chernozems that are here, these are also engineered soils. And then we have desert areas. You know, we have a very spotty historical record because this advanced society clearly got decimated
Absolutely.
in
I just want
prehistory.
to say that they understood the properties of stone. They just did because and just related is that these accounts of the giants, they often find them buried in these gravel pits, okay, and with sand or never just dirt, okay. Besides all the constructions and stone pyramids and walls and all sorts of things, okay, with stone and everything, it's just they understood the properties of stone up and above its general utilitarian usage, you know. So I'm just saying too is if you're in a more advanced society and your civilization is destroyed, you're starting from scratch. You may have all this great advanced knowledge, but the ability for you to do much of anything,
exactly.
you would be like seem like reduced to cavemen, but you would be, you know, reduced to cavemen with Shakespeare in your head, you know, just what are you going to do with yourself? You know, you do the best you can based on what you have and your knowledge of the past. Well, that might be something that wouldn't come right to our minds because we're used to living in the way that we live. You know, you have to put yourself in their shoes, but you definitely hit upon the thing with this stone is that they knew more about the properties of stone than what we would assume people at that time period would. It's just well as their knowledge of astronomy and mathematics, et cetera, et cetera. But we're saying these people are living like cavemen. Well, it turns out a lot of these people weren't running around in deerskins after all. They were running around in cloth. So where'd they get that technology from? So it's just, look, our idea of the past and what it might have been, especially here in Americas, okay, which appears to be where the most accounts of giant humanoids of every variety, and little people too, not only giants, but little people, going back to conquistadors, Cabeza de Vaca, who was on the failed Narvaez expedition. He was the one that got shipwrecked there in Florida with two companions, and then they hiked essentially across Southern America. They met all sorts of little tiny primitive people, giants with, you know, huge bow and arrow. It was like, you know, 9 inches into a tree with one of the giant arrows they tried to avoid. And when they got to where the conquistadors were and found out all the their savagery and barbarity, he went back to Spain and said, look, they're killing people wholesale over there for no reason at all. They said, shut up. You know, he's a bad guy, but he's actually a hero. I found out about him with C.W. Saran's The First American, that book that I read, where C.W. Saran, who used to work for the Nazis, propaganda, came to America. His interest was archaeology, and he said that American archaeology was BS, basically. Okay, he said it was a bunch of nonsense, and they were trying to suppress a lot of stuff from us. And I don't know if you've ever heard of Galena Canyon, but Galena Canyon out there in New Mexico, where there are 500 20 to 30 foot torreones. These are castles, Spanish for castle, torreon, which is not on an American landmark or an archaeological site or a park or anything like that. 500 in a 35 by 25 mile area. 500 of these torreons, okay, with perfectly cut limestone blocks with these torreons, 25 to 30 foot torreons, and all with inside decorated furniture and people of a different phenotype with elongated skulls and everything, who were executed there or genocided by the peaceful people around there, peaceful pueblos over there, executed them all. But do we know anything about this? Look, it's part of the past of the Americas. It's just one of these epics of the giants as they devolved from a time where they could have been bigger. But, you know, their cells were having a lot harder time of it than ours. We adapted more quickly, like many species of animals that were similar to others that we know today, right? So we just don't have any idea what the past is. It seems so much evidence. LAH, Russia, Sylvia, the new thing. Sylvia and I are old friends too. I contributed so much to her channel and her videos.
Sylvia Ivanova?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. her and I were pretty tight before she got big, because I was one of the original people was asking her to translate more of the LAH Russia videos. I wanted to see more of what they were doing there, and she was kind enough to translate some of them and go over some of the material in them. So I was asking her to do that, and then her channel got really like super huge. But her and I used to talk a lot, privately.
Yeah.
But, and I contributed some material to a channel, which was a BBC film where they sent this engineer from Oxford and sculptor down there to South America. And so they told the engineer, look, you can use any of the materials in the area, hire as many men as you can, but you're going to use your 21st century engineering knowledge to get this 10-ton boulder down to the river where you're going to build a raft and float it off downriver like all the academics say they did with the stones when they were moving them from place to place. So the engineer went down, he hired all this men, he used all his knowledge, he created all these rollers and ramps and everything, and in 10 days he had to do this, and he couldn't do it. So they pulled it like 25 feet and wrecked the ramps and everything. So even with his 21st century knowledge, couldn't do it. So he said, okay, we'll put the boulder on the back of a truck, we'll build the ramp down there by a river because we can pull it at least 25 feet. We know that. So we'll pull it there and put it onto the ramp. So they pulled it and put it on to a raft that they built, and it broke the raft in half and dropped to the bottom of the river. So he couldn't do it. And the sculptor took a stone and they said, look, we want you to take this 10-ton boulder and sculpt it into an Olmec head using the tools that the Olmecs had. They did not have any metal tools. They only had stone tools to make these heads with. So they gave him 10 days. And in 10 days, he could barely make a scratch in the rock using the same sort of rightness andesite, which is harder than granite, has like a 7 on the Mohs scale. So after 10 days, people working on it day and night, he made like a little tiny line in it or something like that. And at the end of this thing, they asked the engineer and the sculptor, they said, well, how did they do this stuff? And they said, we have no clue. We have no clue.
It's a big ugly elephant in the room.
All right, guys. Yep. Guys, I gotta wrap it up. We're gonna wrap it up, all guys. Right. Budcat, you want to tell everybody where they can find you?
Yes, that would be Stonewall Research, 3 separate words, Stonewall Research, Budcat7 on YouTube. And yeah, that's my main gig there. I don't have a web page or a blog or anything like that, but you can find me there anytime. And you can see all my radical ideas about I'm the alternative to the alternative. Whatever you heard on the History Channel or Coast to Coast, just forget about that stuff. I'm giving you the real deal on my channel as far as the real information using mainstream. That's why I don't get cut from YouTube, probably, because I use mainstream, to turn it on its head. So right, find me there at Stonewall Research, Budcat7 on YouTube.
All right, and I recommend everybody check out that channel. It is really interesting. I want to thank everybody who wrote me emails suggesting to get Budcat7 on. It's definitely an interesting conversation. Jared, I'm sure you're going to stick with me for the end. We'll be right back on Conflict Radio right after this. Welcome back to Conflict Radio. That was Budcat7. Jared, what do you think?
Well, it's pretty cool. He's done a lot of work. He's done a lot of research. He's done a lot of what he has pointed out of the facts in the ground, the already pre-existing finds. We know that the narrative needs to change from this story that's been told to us in our typical high school, junior high, elementary school upbringing and collegiate environment. It's just so far from what's really gone on. And he's done a lot of research that has a lot of different rabbit holes that I think a lot of people, depending on what you're drawn to, if it's not your starting point or midpoint or advanced point, this will help you, I think, help all of us build a new narrative about our history and about what we're seeing when it comes to UFOs.
What do you think about the idea that the UFO is really a wild animal that lives in space? It's just another, I guess, a life form of its own. Like, it's not being piloted by aliens. It's not from an alien planet. What do you think about that theory?
I think it's interesting because, Eric von Daniken's pointed out about 9 different satellites in space that possibly are high technology, ancient objects that are left over from a prior advanced human population. And again, the whole theory that it's a little uneasy. It's a theory that there's this natural environment. What we're really living on is a giant broken, I think, biological, programmed and engineered system that is in safe mode. So some things continue to work, some things continue to break, and whatever happened to our advanced, ancient, high technology ancestors, and whatever catastrophe that ultimately ended a worldwide global consortium or country or just government, and the year is again, if you have engineered plants and engineered soil and engineered people, how far is it from nanotechnology to engineer a craft, or what we think of as a craft? But what if these an extension could be UFOs that are actually not driven, but are part of this ancient past, and they're pre-programmed or living biological nanotechnology creatures that have gone rogue, or being left with no maintenance or updating or programming, have become feral or wild, and they're flying and they're coming and going, and they're maybe half fulfilling a prior research project or programming from thousands or tens of thousands of years ago, or they've developed their own mindset because nothing's interacted with them the way they should have been interacted with, because it just got hit on pause. I always talk about ancient advanced satellites. They may have gone off like our Voyager satellite, and when we get an intelligent response from space, that it could be an ancient technology object that is sending communication back to a society that no longer exists. It never occurred to me personally to think outside of a satellite, an ancient high technology satellite. I didn't specifically consider, irrelevant to living bricks, and I talk about that the technology of a satellite could look like a hard object that wouldn't be living. It would be a smart rock, like a smart flash drive. But the idea that they biologically engineered a more thinking satellite, or what we're going to call a ship or a craft that's coming and going and still fulfilling some sort of ancient duty, and that's a fascinating possibility. I'm kind of excited about it.
Yeah, it doesn't really explain the grays though.
Yeah, and that's such a hard thing for people to grab. It's easy to go, well, they don't look like us, they're different, and they tell us based on people who have interacted with them or claim to have. They're like, well, they're alien. Well, again, it is not possibly either a need to know for us or in their best interest to point out, well, actually, I'm your great, 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 great times 1,000 ancestor. I am human. I just look like this because I have full dynamic control of the human genome. And for me to interact with my craft, which is also a biological entity, I have these larger eyes because I got a lot more onboard plus frequency wave communication, and my skin is like this because my skin sees also, and I can sense, feel, and communicate through every piece of my skin. And so I tripped myself out because my tasks and job and life is just good if I'm this style of creation. And this is all in Ray Kurzweil's Singularity is Near, which is about the time when man and machine and technology, where we have the ability to program DNA. And if you don't want to have biological tissue-based DNA, you could have diamondoid crystalloid structure. So you'd literally be the Man of Steel. You'd be like Superman. So you could program yourself to look like however you want. So it's our history of understanding technology that leaves a lot of us that are from a certain age and younger a paradigm where we look at a gray, a reptilian. You fill in, everybody can sing the song of every kind of different creature they've encountered of these, in quotes, races, versus they're actually tripped out humans that can control how their DNA behaves, and therefore they customize themselves just like they would customize again, a technology that we always think of the word technology as external or an implantable. We don't think of genes themselves, even though we're cloning, even though we're already custom designing babies, and we're now legally able to sell printed meat that we're now making. We are very close to the Star Trek food processor, and that's what we have to start getting in the narrative, that you're looking at someone that you're saying is alien because you're judging them on their appearance, not that their technology has allowed them the versatility to not appear human. And then what's worse is, if they want to interact with us and say, I'm an alien, woo, Rick and Morty style, put on these antenna, you're an alien.
Yeah.
It's not, and that's difficult for it. It's easier. It's harder to consider that they're from here and that they're local than it is to go, oh no, they're alien because they said so. That's easier to accept. So that's it's a hard one to get your head around, but it's
possible.
Yeah, it's more likely that that's what it is, but it's hard for people to start it with it, and really it's just table the facts. Learn each technology that we find, whether it's megalithic, and like we were talking about the megalithic buildings, and he's like, well, giants could lift more. Yeah, totally true. Even if they had frequency and wave and anti-gravity technology that we don't quite understand, and they really didn't need to lift anything, and by the time they're cutting and shaping and moving around a block, and again, the idea of geopolymers, Dr. Joseph David Ovitz is the father of geopolymers. We didn't bring him up, but he himself has theorized, and his group at the Geopolymer Institute have theorized that, like at Tiwanaku, that they, like the famous H blocks, that they were cast, that they are geopolymers, and that there are ancient high-tech geopolymers all over the planet. That is totally a possibility.
Yeah,
but
it really is fascinating stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, it's super cool. I mean, he's got a lot of good rabbit holes for people to start doing their own research. And again, it's overwhelmingly just not appreciated exactly how many people were living on the planet in its entirety, and definitely how many people in the truly ancient past lived in from Canada and Greenland down to South America, Central America. There were an incredible amount of people that are not accounted for or acknowledged. And yeah, in the conquistador time, those are dynastic peoples. Those are cultures that moved in after cataclysm. Pre-dynastic peoples, the survival period, whatever that is, in the time of the occupation of this more advanced society, I think it was a tremendous amount of people. And the soil, the engineered soil, all these other tidbits and these ruins, not just the rock walls where they've been restacked or if they're primitive or advanced with megalithic blocking, but the canals that he was talking about. It's crazy. There's you can see them from space, the canals in Arizona, the canals in Florida. These are what society was building canal systems other than Venice, Italy. This is all stuff that stands out and is ignored and or just quietly muted, and it's just not going to work anymore. These things need to be addressed by institutions directly.
That's definitely the truth. Jared, you want to tell everyone where they can find you?
Yeah, on notaliens.com. I have my book, a personal signed copy. I will send it out to you for a few dollars more than the Amazon one. I also have a new member area, and through Christmas, we're offering 6 months or 1 year. You get a free copy of the book, and or 2 copies if you sign up for the year. I do send them out personally, and that puts you getting into some really cool membership stuff. It's going to be worth everybody for those research hounds and just for those entertainment hounds to be on the site, which will basically cost you a small espresso, about $2 something a month. And it would love to have some more people sign up and get some free books and come to notaliens.com. And of course, most importantly, we are going to continue interviewing here on Conflict, and you and I have quite a show list now that everybody can listen to, and all your other shows are awesome, but we have quite the library growing at this point. We should have a CD box set.
Yeah, you know what? We should create one day.
Oh my gosh, we should. What was I thinking? We could do a CD box set of our interviews. I mean, we've done Michael Cremo twice, and Scott Walter, and Dennis Stone, and I mean, we got some really cool...
I want to get Scott Walter back on again. We need to get him back on again. I have more questions for him.
Oh, yeah, there's so many. Yeah.
All right, awesome. Well, remember, you can always find us online. Just go to www.conflictradio.net. You can find us on all of your normal podcast catchers, including Apple iTunes and Apple iHeart Podcasts and Spreaker and all of your normal podcast catchers. You can find us on YouTube. Make sure you like and subscribe. Please like the video because it does help the channel grow, and it helps get the word out that we've got stuff going on over here. So go ahead and do that. Until next time, this is Jared and Conflict signing out. Batten down the hatches and be safe.